Hi, my name is Jamie.
I'm Torsten.
I'm Niels.
We play in a band called God is an Astronaut, and we're here talking to Premier Guitar doing the Big Five. My favorite guitar is the guitar that I'm currently using live. It's a US Jazzmaster. I'll get it. I got it here. This is it. Nice cream. Looks the part. The interesting thing about this Jazzmaster is the customizations I've had done to it. So I'm using pickups from a guy called Curtis Novak, the JM fat in the bridge, and this JM on the neck. Outside of that, I've had 500 meg pots put in, and the bridge is the Stay Trim bridge. I do quite a lot of work with the tremolo arm as well, so it holds its tuning quite well. I play like mostly lead stuff in the band, so it's important that I have a good solid bridge that holds the tuning. I also have tuning locks put in as well. They didn't come custom with it. But for the most part, these kind of guitars are cool because they're designed to kind of take a bit of a battering. I could be quite animated on stage. So, you know, if they fall, it's not ideal, obviously, but if they do fall, it's not the end of the world. They're very chunky, they're very durable. And I just really like the way they feel. I have a couple of them actually. I have a vintage reissue as well, but this is my favorite one.
What's my favorite guitar? I've got a couple of them. Currently, it's this one, which is a Fender Custom Shop Jazzmaster. I didn't change anything on it. I love everything that's on it. I love the bridge. I love the whole feel of the guitar. It's much more mellow, I noticed, tonally than a normal Jazzmaster. You can cut the ears off you, and you normally, with a lot of the other Jazzmasters, I find you have to take the volume back or the tone back a good bit. You can leave this thing up full if you wanted to. I still take it a little bit back on the tone, but it's a lovely mellow sound, very easy to play. I did change one thing on it, which is the Stay Trim locking tremolo thing, because the other one was coming loose, so it does keep it together for me. Very sturdy, which is important for me. Holds its tuning really, really well. I can change the tuning on it and use the tremolo, which I don't know many guitars that you can do that with like with a Strat. That's a disaster if you try to use the tremolo. You know, forget about using other tunings. I didn't change the tuners on it. Normally I'd go for locking tuners, just that it's sometimes quicker for me to change the tuning, but I kind of taken out a few more guitars. I've got two of these identical guitars, so I'm happy enough just to kind of keep these guitars in their respective tunings. They're usually different. Some are tuned DAD, GBE. This one I think is currently tuned B, F sharp, C sharp, F sharp, A, C sharp at the moment for different aesthetics and sounds. It's got a nice kind of vintage woody tone to it, and just a much warmer than your normal Jazzmaster. It's got a lovely chime to it as well. A lot of my playing is using open tunings, and I like it to resonate. And I find a lot of Jazzmasters, they sound, it just kind of, I don't know, it just sounds stunted, like the strings aren't ringing as freely as I'd like them to. There's no such problem with this guitar. It just rings a lovely sustain on the instrument, more than what I would have expected from a Jazzmaster.
This is currently my favorite bass I'm using. It's just a Mustang JMJ model. I've always wanted to play with a short scale. This is the first short scale that actually works with our music. It's all stock. There's nothing really changed on it. I think it's got the Seymour Duncan pickups in it. I usually play with the tone rolled off, volume kind of nearly up full. I use a lot of drive, a lot of distortion. In the past, I would have used a P bass before. With this, this is what I'm using at the moment. It's definitely, I think this is the bass that kind of has sit with me for the last few years, and I'm still extremely happy with it. Normally I would go to basses pretty quick, so I've been using this for the last couple of years.
What's my desert island album? For me, it's an Irish band called Whipping Boy. They, I think, began around 94, 93, and they released a couple of albums. Submarine was, I think, their first album, and Heartworm was their kind of major album that kind of really resonated with a lot of people here in Ireland. And I really love that album. I still even to this day, it's really, really fresh. And you can see a lot of groups today even influenced by that album here in Ireland. Fontaine's DC, for example. A lot of people, when you listen to Whipping Boy, you can see there's a history that, you know, that people have been influenced, us included. And yeah, so I would say Heartworm by Whipping Boy.
For me, I think it would probably have to be Kid A, Radiohead. I was quite young when it came out, and I just remember being really blown away by the different melodies that those guys kind of came up with, different time signatures. His voice is just timeless as well. That particular record just stuck with me over the years.
For me, I think I would have to be something ambient, like Apex Twin, some of the selected ambient works. I think that would probably get the most listens for me, because you can have it on all the time. Where if it's a piece of music with lyrics or guitars and stuff, I think I get pretty bored of that. At least with Apex Twin, you can just have it on all the time, and I probably wouldn't end up topping myself or something.
So what's my biggest guitar culture pet peeve? I have a few of them, but I think one of the main ones for me is musicians who think that everything can be achieved with the guitar volume and not with and you don't need many pedals to achieve a sound. It's not true. It really depends on the style of music that you're playing. Of course, if you're playing blues and rock music, they have a point. But if you're trying to play anything that's kind of more experimental and noise and kind of, you're tonally trying to shape a sound in a more experimental way, you definitely need a couple of guitar pedals to create those tones and textures. It's not the same as using the volume of the guitar.
For me, my pet peeve would certainly be when musicians prioritize the technique over the actual content that they're performing or that they're writing. Not that I have an issue with like sweeping or tapping. Sure, I even do some tapping on some of our stuff. But when you get to a stage where you're trying to showcase your ability over your content, your melody, for me, music is fundamentally should be, just subjectively, in my opinion, it should be about the melody, what you're trying to say musically, rather than what you're trying to achieve from a technical perspective. Sometimes it's about the kind of spaces in between the notes rather than trying to fill them all. You know what I mean?
I think it's an easy one. It's the finger bass knob. So I use both plectrum, or pick as you call it in the States, and fingers. The idea that you should just use fingers on the bass is kind of annoying. Pick gives you a completely different tone. For some of our stuff, the pick suits better. For some of the softer songs, I would use fingers as well. But yeah, it's just the typical finger bass knob comes along and says you shouldn't use a plectrum on the bass.
Which guitar hero of mine would shock our fans? I don't know if it would shock our fans, but for me, it would be Malcolm Young from AC/DC. His guitar tone is a benchmark for everything that I do. Even though we play very, very different music, I just see the tone that AC/DC, Angus too, the sound that they get mid-tone wise is genius. It's a lot more detailed than what people could possibly appreciate. And I know they're purists as well, not much pedals in their setup, of course, but that is even more important for me because I use pedals to make sure that I can still somewhat compete with such an amazing sound. And if I'm in the ballpark with something like that, I know that I'm in safe waters.
For me, it would probably have to be Matt Bellamy from Muse, especially the first two Muse albums. I went to see them in a place called the Olympia in Dublin, which is a small enough venue. I was up front and I got to see him jump between the piano and the guitar. And for me, as a multi-instrumentalist, it was very inspiring. He collabed with a guitar company called Manson, I think is the name of the guitar company. He built a guitar that had a chaos pad built into the body of the guitar, and he was able to take solos and trigger the chaos pad at the same time. And I always remember thinking that was a cool marriage of like the weird sort of technical electronic world and heavy riff rock stuff.
It's a bit of a tough one. It's tied between Cliff Burton and Lemmy from Motorhead. Let's say go with Lemmy from Motorhead. I just like the idea of where a bass doesn't have to be a bass, where it can be, especially in Motorhead, most of the sound was generated from the bass, that heavy tone. For me, that was just awesome. The idea that he didn't play bass, he played heavy rhythm guitar on the bass was awesome. They had such crossover because of this. They could appeal to thrash, they could appeal to punk. But yeah, so definitely Lemmy from Motorhead.
What's my secret weapon? For me, it would probably be the Meris Hedra multi-pitch delay pedal. I experimented with where you put the delay in the signal chain. Obviously delay usually goes more or less towards the end, maybe even in the effect send and return or whatever. But for me, I put it very near the start because I love the way the multi-pitch, so you're getting a lot of different pitches, a lot of different delays, and you feed it into the distortion pedals, and it just creates this insane sustain distorted lead that just becomes just otherworldly, going into say a Friedman and then into a fuzz pedal, and it just takes off. Fantastic effect. I love it.
It's hard really to pick between the two. It's either my orange amp or else it's a combination between two guitar pedals that I'm using, the Stomp Underfoot Pumpkin Pie and the Friedman OD Deluxe pedal. The two of them actually work very well together. By nature, the Pumpkin Pie is a little bit mid-stripped, so I just crank the mid on the Friedman and I send it into the pump combined. Those two pedals combined just really make up my sound. Aside from that, secret weapon for surviving a tour is just doing the load out as quickly as we can, getting back to the hotel room and going to sleep if possible, so we don't all lose our minds.
For me, I suppose it's two things. One is preparation. Make sure that you're prepared before you go out anywhere. I like to do lots of rehearsal at home by myself to make sure I have the sound. I think the other key for my secret weapon is using a lot of drive on the bass. I never have a clean bass sound. There's always some sort of distortion on it. That's definitely the biggest change for me from when I started to now. I think it makes the bass more audible in the mix, more aggressive, and more of a featured instrument rather than something that's background. I'm using a Dark Glass X Ultra at the moment. It's the one where you can distort the frequency. So like from 0 to 250 is clean. Then the mid-band is distorted, and I think from about 4K upwards it's kind of clean as well. And then I use a big muff, and then had a few other drive pedals I interchange every now and then. But yeah, a lot of distortion. I think people are kind of, especially during the sound check, when I'm doing the sound check, they don't know what. It doesn't sound like a bass, it just sounds like a chainsaw.